What have you learned from Zia, and what have you learned from Behram? And second, who are the people you look up to in the legal profession that you currently work with or have worked in the past by?
Yeah. So obviously, the learnings are difficult to quantify, but clearly from Zia, her energy, her willingness to get on a flight, take things on, tremendous energy. She has God bless her, tremendous energy, and she can just get after something with a real dogged approach, and of course, she has marvelous intellect. Behram, very very. Very compassionate person, very while very hardworking, very client focused, a person who calms things down. So we have the calming. There are two hyper people. Zia and I both Cancerians. We tend to get hyper. He calms them down. I'm a little less hyper in many ways. Sometimes, so we have a balancing. Who's more hyper? Sometimes there are two hyper, and then he's balancing them out, or there's one hyper and two are balancing down. But he's always the guy with the calm. Either chodo, soch lo, sleep over it, think about it. So it's been a fantastic. As I said, that's why it's become a friendship more than just a professional relationship. As far as people who have really played an influence in my life, frankly, there are two very major influences. One was Mr. NKP Salve, my original boss, Harish's father. He actually shaped my entire career. He's the one who made me do chartered law while I was doing chartered accountancy, and has been a great contributor to my life in terms of approach to work, in terms of his approach to clients. My father, again, though he was not in legal practice, but because he was a professional in terms of how to approach clients, to give that go the extra mile for your client and make the person feel comfortable. He and Mr. Salve had very similar values, and they were very good friends as well. So those have been two fantastic influences. And thirdly, Harish himself. Harish was, when I was working with Mr. Salve's chamber, Harish was also doing his chartered accountancy. And actually he lied to get me my first hearing in the tribunal, because Mr. Salve used to always appear with people who have appeared before. And we were to go to Allahabad for a very heavy duty matter for JK Synthetics, I've never forgotten. And Mr. Salve asked me, "Beta, aap kabhi tribunal mein gaye ho?" So of course I hadn't ever appeared. Before I could say anything, Harish said, "Yes, of course he's been to the tribunal, but many times." And I went with him to Allahabad. I have never, Anurag, forgotten that hearing. I have never forgotten the judgment which was cited here, Raman Iron Foundry. In my life, I'll never forget it, because I made all the mistakes. But when I came out and I told Mr. Salve, he asked me, "Beta, have you ever actually appeared?" So I said, "This is a very short job. I'm going to get fired now." Instead, he puts his arms around me and he says, "Oh my God, how much pressure I must have put on you. I'm going to fire Kiku," Harish, his name, "fire him for having allowed you to take this pressure on. We could have hired another person to sit in the court with you so that your first hearing could have gone smoothly." So you can't find people like that any longer. And I have very fond memories of Mr. Salve and what I learned from him, and of course Harish as well.
Okay, I said last, but I'm tempted to ask. I'm in the media sector, which was called TMT 20 odd years back, technology, media, and technology, media, telecom. Now you have done so much work in that domain, and that too in the right from the biggest players in this sector. Today, technology, media, and telecom have merged. You look at Geo, you look at other players. Where do you see that going? In terms of how it impacts business, the gray areas in policy, so on and so forth.
Yeah, so I think that, I think everybody is basically enjoying the benefit of what people like ESS and ESPN did by actually, making people pay for content, and making people feel that content should be paid for. I'm sure you know ESS, people must have told you at that time when they were going pay, everybody said, "Go home. You're never going to be able to make anything after cricket." And we did the Sahara Cup in Canada so that we didn't have to share with BCCI. And it was an exclusive event, Pakistan playing India after 7 years. And we went up to 3 million subscribers. So at that time, the major problem which people don't have today was that you had to go through an intermediary to put your content. So you were dependent on the cable operator, and the fights and the battles we had. It was a constant scrap that was going on, and all the regulation was focused on television. Now with the OTT and the telecom, regulation hasn't been as stringent, first of all, as far as their content, etc., as was with television. But more importantly, the intermediary is gone. Today, Airtel can communicate directly with me. They don't need an interface. So whatever they want to transmit as content can be given to me directly. Netflix can come to me directly. There's no interface required. All I need is a TV and I need streaming. So I think that opportunity for players and for content has become now a real opportunity. And we used to always earlier, remember, there used to be a fight about is content king or is distribution king? Now actually the lines are blurred because distribution is critical, because unless you have the eyeballs, nobody is there to watch your content. But once you have the eyeballs, or you're building up, have the capacity of building eyeballs without having to be constrained by an intermediary, then content becomes very relevant. So to answer your question, I think that this business is going to continue to grow. But definitely, I think there is some gray areas in terms of the policy framework for television broadcasting and internet broadcasting, as you're aware. Maybe it's the right thing. I'm not suggesting that there should be an alignment necessarily, but that has given the flexibility to players to be able to do things on the internet through streaming, which is not permissible if you were doing the same thing over a television broadcast. But it's a very exciting time. And I think that the customers are getting the best deal that they can ever have got. So much content that you're really struggling for what you actually want to watch out of so much content that is there. But it's a good experience.
How is AZB and partners staying futuristic? And is the Indian legal system ready for AI and legal tech?
So let me answer the second one first. I think AI is always going to be, in my view, a support function, at least in the short run. I don't think AI is going to take over the mind, because strategies and tactics require a lot of interactive thinking, and it requires a lot of duality of thinking. I may have a view, the client may have a view. So there has to be a lot of interaction before you come to a final solution. AI is great assistance in being able to reach that. You can get faster, you can get let's say you're reviewing precedents, or you're reviewing any other, you're looking at various, let's say I want to analyze 10 mergers, what happened in terms of the outcome, were they able to synchronize themselves, and so all those experiences AI can help greatly, but I don't think AI will take over. I hope, at least certainly I'm hoping not in the near term, will take over our creative, what we believe is our creative thinking. So, but it's a support service, we recognize it, and of course we use a lot of that. As far as AZB staying futuristic, I think my personal view is that ultimately our business is all about client satisfaction. So futuristic or living in the past, unless you have a satisfied client, that the goal of being in practice is not going to be satisfied. So I think to be futuristic, you need to be more and more involved with your client's business, and you need to get much more involved with the domain. So if I am working on a client, as Anurag talked about media, I should know as much about media here, I should know international practices, so that I can actually be a part and parcel of the client team. So the futuristic model, and which we follow today, is that we are an extension of the client's team, just sitting outside the client's office. And therefore, we want to be in a position where we are equipped to fulfill that role of being advisors rather than just legal advisors in that sense, but play a broader role in developing the client's business and the client's needs. I think that is what the future is going to require, and I think that our team, our build-up, the focus and the way our teams have been, have worked over the years, that is how they operate and approach matters. So I think they're ready for today, they're ready for tomorrow, they're ready for the future.
Thank you, sir. And so, digressing a little bit and to briefly touch upon some of the topical issues, particularly in the wake of geo-block on Chinese apps and absence of specific legislation for data protection in India. What would be your advice to other companies in possession of consumer data right now?
See, I think data is become a very sensitive issue, as you know. Sometimes it surprises me because people will share the same data with Facebook, but the moment that is used by somebody else, they're given it to or used by the government, all hell breaks loose. So I get a little surprised at that time. But principally, I think the principal issue is what we are telling people is use data carefully. If you've got somebody's personal data in the course of a transaction, try as far as possible to work within what you think the law is going to be like, because at the end of the day, it's not this that there is no legislation, but the development of what will be future legislation is in place. You may not agree with everything, but there are certain themes within that which I think resound with everybody, just common sense, in terms of the ability to use somebody's data, take the consent, etc. So we are just telling people, keep an eye on the development and try and follow it as far as possible. Just the fact that there is no legislation doesn't necessarily mean we shouldn't do the right thing. That's the way we look at it. That's self-regulation. So that's there's no reason for people not to self-regulate.
That's true. And so I think that marks the end of our professional questions. But one personal question: is there a bucket list that Ajay Bahal has, and would you please allow us a peek into your personal life outside of work?
So you want to know if I have any hobbies? So the answer to your question is yes. I'm a very fond runner. I've run 8 half marathons. I was very keen to do at least 10, but I got an injury in my knee, so I'm still hoping that I'll make up for 2 more. I ski. More importantly, I'm an aspiring disc jockey. So maybe when things are okay and we are back, you have some celebration party, I'll come and DJ for you guys. And I'm playing a musical instrument now. And I try and balance my day with all of these. But right now also I have a great desire to be able to contribute a little bit from a governmental standpoint. So I do like to spend a fair amount of time in just trying to work with policymakers and try and share ideas and thoughts in terms of seeing how we can make things better, how we can just make life a little better for all of us. In terms of how we should operate, self-regulation, etc. So that's partly professional, but it's become a hobby now. But the rest of them are just, what my current hobbies are, and I'm enjoying them actually.
That's nice, Mr. Bahal. Would have never picked you for a DJ though. That's some revelation.
Yes. One day I will give you. I'll make an offer to you for your next party.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bahal. Thank you so much for sharing your journey and views with us. It has been an honor to interview today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.